You have spent your life working hard, paying your taxes, and playing by the rules while watching the country you love change right before your eyes. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on a confrontation that the mainstream media desperately tried to bury, because it exposes the raw truth about how Washington actually works. Stick with me until the very end of this report, because I'm going to show you the exact documents and the specific dates that prove how a lifetime of public service can somehow lead to a private fortune of $250 million. I promise that by the time we finish, you will never look at a career politician the same way again. This isn't just a debate. It is a forensic audit of a legacy that has left a once great American city in ruins, while the elites behind the gates prospered beyond imagination. The Fox News studio in Midtown Manhattan was charged with an electric tension that felt more like a heavyweight title fight than a political forum. 600 people packed into the room, representing the largest audience the network had ever assembled for a single program. On one side sat the red-capped patriots who have felt ignored for decades, and in the corner sat the loyalists to the speaker, looking increasingly out of place in a room that demanded accountability. Nancy Pelosi walked onto that stage with the practiced air of a woman who has spent 37 years being protected by institutional deference. She expected to lecture the audience on norms and dignity, using her usual slow and deliberate cadence to dismiss any criticism as mere partisan noise. Donald Trump walked out to a roar that literally shook the foundations of the building, but he wasn't just bringing his signature energy this time. He was carrying a thick, heavy folder that he dropped onto the podium with a thud that echoed through every microphone in the room. This was the moment the game changed, because for the first time in her career, Pelosi was facing someone who didn't care about the unwritten rules of the Washington cocktail circuit. Trump didn't start with vague accusations or the usual political talking points that lead nowhere. He went straight for the jugular by holding up the financial disclosure forms that most Americans never get to see in detail. The billionaire from Queens looked directly at the woman who has represented San Francisco since 1987 and asked the question that every working family in this country has been whispering for years. How does a person who makes a government salary of $174,000 a year end up with a net worth of $250 million? Trump didn't wait for a scripted response about smart investing or family assets, because he had the receipts ready for the massive screens behind him. He began detailing the stock trading empire run out of the Speaker's office, starting with the infamous Visa IPO trade from 2008. He showed the timeline where Paul Pelosi purchased millions in stock, just as legislation that would have crippled credit card companies was conveniently killed in committee. If you are tired of seeing the elites play by a different set of rules while you struggle with inflation, make sure to comment below with the word accountability and subscribe to this channel right now so we can keep bringing you the facts they want to hide. The evidence displayed on those screens was a devastating blow to the image of the selfless public servant that Pelosi has spent millions on public relations to maintain. Trump walked the audience through trade after trade, showing a pattern of success that would make the best hedge fund managers on Wall Street look like amateurs. He pointed to the millions made in Tesla stock just months before massive government subsidies for electric vehicles were pushed through the House. He highlighted the perfectly timed purchases of big tech giants like Google and Microsoft right before favorable tax treatments or major government contracts were announced. It wasn't just luck. And it wasn't just a coincidence that every single one of these trades moved in favor of the Pelosi family fortune. The atmosphere in the studio turned cold as Trump leaned into the microphone to call it exactly what it looked like to any rational observer. He called it the largest insider trading operation in the history of the United States government, run directly from the Speaker's chair. Pelosi tried to deflect by stating that her husband's investments are fully disclosed according to the law. But Trump was ready for that move, firing back that disclosure doesn't make the act legal. It just means they are bragging about the corruption in plain sight. He mocked the idea of transparency that serves as a shield for self-enrichment while the rest of the country is told to tighten its belt. As the charts on the screen showed the Pelosi wealth skyrocketing over the decades, Trump pivoted to the human cost of this brand of leadership. He began showing high-resolution images of San Francisco, a city that was once the crown jewel of the West Coast, but has now become a cautionary tale of progressive failure. The contrast was jarring and intentionally brutal for the viewers at home and in the studio. On one screen was the $25 million mansion in Pacific Heights where the speaker lives behind high walls and armed security. On the other screen were the images of homeless encampments and drug use just 3 blocks away from her front door. Trump didn't stop at the photos. He pulled out the data from the city's own mobile reporting app to show the reality of life in their district. He cited the 28,000 reports of human waste on the streets in a single year, a statistic that turned the stomachs of everyone watching. He spoke about the businesses closing their doors, from small mom-and-pop shops to major retailers like Walgreens, because the rule of law has been abandoned. This is the legacy of 37 years in power, a city drowning in social decay while the person representing it gets richer every single day. The billionaire looked at her with genuine disgust, stating that she hasn't improved her district. She has only extracted wealth from it. We are just getting started with the evidence regarding the events of January 6th and the luxury hypocrisy that will leave you speechless. So hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments if you think members of Congress should be banned from trading stocks forever. The tension reached a boiling point when Trump moved the discussion toward the hypocrisy of the lockdowns that destroyed countless lives across the country. He reminded the audience of the time Pelosi showed off her $24,000 Sub-Zero refrigerators filled with $12 pints of gourmet ice cream. While small business owners were watching their life's work go up in flames, she was giving a televised tour of her luxury kitchen. This wasn't just a gaffe. It was a window into the soul of an elite class that truly believes they are better than the people they serve. They expect you to stay home and lose your paycheck while they enjoy the finest things life has to offer. To drive the point home, he played the viral security footage of her visit to a shuttered hair salon during the height of the California lockdowns. The video showed her walking through the business without a mask, violating the very rules she was demanding every other American follow. When she was caught, she didn't apologize to the business owner or the public. She claimed it was a setup. Trump used this moment to illustrate the fundamental arrogance of the modern political establishment. They create the rules for you to follow, but they live as though those rules are merely suggestions for the common people. Tip may fun to check. Tisen sai sao vào nungok tut css kyan in de 6-1. SS that via 20.0. O linvi. Bin quuk jia. But ti chu. Vi long. Man jia shu kutch. Tin va long trunk than. VVI quuk jia. Vivivad. Viva song. Put name for jack that chu may man jia shu kutch ruse. Kain says Kain and Jayat 6-1 has such thing 1 day assistandis. K Lofen tip theoca kachpan die trine vinfong mdn nam vatrok dine. SB Leon T Trong Fane. Approximately 1,100 words. The folder on Trump's podium held more than just financial records. It contained the heavy weight of national security failures that the media has tried to pin on everyone except the person actually in charge of the building. Trump looked across the stage and brought the conversation to January 6th, a day that has been weaponized by the establishment to silence half of the country. He didn't offer theories. He offered the official Pentagon confirmations that have been conveniently left out of the primetime hearings. He reminded the audience that as Speaker of the House, the security of the Capitol falls directly under her oversight. It is a responsibility she accepted for decades, yet when the moment of crisis arrived, the records show a series of denials that defy any logical explanation. Trump pulled out the authorization documents from January 3rd, showing that he had preemptively offered up to 20,000 National Guard troops to secure the Capitol grounds. He displayed the timeline on the massive screens for every American to see, showing the exact moment the Speaker's office was notified and the exact moment they said no. He asked the room why a leader would reject thousands of trained soldiers when the intelligence reports were already flashing red. The answer, according to the documents, wasn't about safety. It was about the optics of having Trump's National Guard present at the seat of government. She made a political calculation that left the men and women of the Capitol Police vulnerable and unsupported. The screens then shifted to show the desperate requests from the Capitol Police leadership for additional support in the days leading up to the event. Requests that were repeatedly denied by the officials reporting to the Speaker. Trump paced the stage, his voice rising as he described how the committee she handpicked spent 2 years and millions of taxpayer dollars to investigate everyone but themselves. He pointed out the staggering fact that the committee deleted its own records and text messages before the leadership changed hands. If the goal was truly the truth, you don't destroy the evidence of your own security decisions. You don't hide the communications that would explain why the building was left unprotected. If you believe that the American people deserve the full, unedited truth about who was responsible for the security of our Capitol, make sure to comment with the word truth and hit that subscribe button right now to help us bypass the censors. The discussion then turned to the era of impeachment, a period that Trump described as a multi-million-dollar obsession that achieved nothing for the American people. He held up the articles from the first impeachment, reminding the audience that it began because he had the audacity to ask questions about corruption involving the Biden family in Ukraine. He showed the final Senate vote where he was acquitted, marking it as the first of 2 failed attempts to overrule the will of the voters through legislative theater. He played the famous clip of Pelosi standing behind him at the State of the Union, dramatically ripping up his speech on national television while the world watched in disbelief. That speech contained stories of American heroes, plans for economic growth, and the names of families who had been helped by his policies. By ripping it up, Trump argued, she wasn't just disrespecting him. She was disrespecting the country and the office she claims to hold sacred. He pointed out that while she was busy with her partisan performances, the border was being left wide open for anyone and anything to cross. He displayed images of the southern border, contrasted with the high walls and security gates surrounding her vineyard in Napa Valley and her mansion in San Francisco. It is the ultimate form of elitism to live behind walls while telling the American people the walls are immoral and ineffective. Trump highlighted the devastating impact of this open border policy, showing statistics on the surge of fentanyl that is claiming over 100,000 American lives every year. He spoke about the human trafficking and the criminal gangs that are taking advantage of the chaos, all while the people in Washington live in gated communities with 24-hour protection. He looked at Pelosi and asked how she could justify denying border security to the citizens of this country when she wouldn't spend a single night without her own private security detail. It is a double standard that has become the hallmark of the modern Democrat Party, where rules are for the people and protection is for the politicians. The crowd watched in silence as Trump listed the casualties of these policies, from the small business owners in California to the families in the heartland losing children to drugs. He argued that 37 years in power had turned a public servant into a queen who no longer remembers what it's like to walk down a street without a security escort. He brought the focus back to her wealth extraction, linking the open borders and the decline of American cities to the rise of a globalist elite that profits while the nation suffers. This was the moment where the billionaire from Queens and the career politician from San Francisco stood in the sharpest contrast. If you are ready to see an end to the era of career politicians getting rich while the border remains a disaster, please subscribe to this channel and share your thoughts in the comments about who really failed our country on January 6th. As the debate drew toward its conclusion, Trump didn't let up on the receipts, moving back to the stock trades that seemed to track every major legislative move. He focused on a specific trade involving Visa stock that occurred just as credit card reform was being debated in the House. He showed that after the purchase, the bill that would have lowered fees for consumers was quietly shelved, and the stock price soared, netting the Pelosi family a fortune in a matter of weeks. He asked the audience if they had ever seen a more perfect example of a rigged system. It isn't just about one person. It's about a culture of corruption that has taken over our Capitol. Trump's final indictment was a masterclass in evidence-based politics, leaving the speaker with no room to hide behind her usual talking points. He had shown the photos, played the videos, and displayed the government documents that proved his points. He stood at the center of the stage, leaving his stack of folders behind as a testament to the facts he had presented. He told the audience that they have a choice between a system that extracts wealth from the people and a movement that wants to return that power to the citizens. The legacy of Nancy Pelosi, he concluded, is written in the feces on the streets of San Francisco and the millions in her bank account. The reaction from the audience was a thunderous standing ovation that lasted for minutes, a sound that signaled the end of an era for the old guard of Washington. The video of this confrontation didn't just go viral. It became a historical document that millions of people used to finally understand the reality of their government. Within hours, the stock trading records and the photos of the $24,000 refrigerator were trending across every platform, making it impossible for the mainstream media to keep their protective shield around the speaker any longer. The truth was out, and it was documented in a way that no spin doctor could ever fix. The aftermath of that 90-minute exposure was nothing short of a political earthquake that left the mainstream media in a state of total paralysis. For decades, outlets like CNN and MSNBC had acted as a protective barrier around the speaker, framing any question about her wealth as a conspiracy theory or a sexist attack. But the numbers Trump put on those screens were too massive and too well documented to be ignored by any honest person. Within 48 hours, the video of the confrontation had been viewed over 100 million times across every platform imaginable. The public wasn't waiting for the evening news to tell them what to think. They were looking at the stock trading records and the photos of San Francisco's decline for themselves. Even the most loyal defenders of the establishment were forced to scramble for a narrative that simply wasn't there. CNN tried to assemble panels of analysts to explain away the suspicious timing of Paul Pelosi's stock trades, but the effort backfired when their own experts had to admit the appearance of impropriety was severe. Anderson Cooper attempted a damage control interview with the speaker, but it only served to highlight her inability to answer basic questions about how her family's fortune grew while she held the gavel. When asked directly why her husband's trades always seemed to coincide with legislative action, her rambling response about disclosure requirements became another viral clip that satisfied no one. The reality of the situation began to set in as the polling data started to flood in from every corner of the country. Before the debate, a large segment of the population was unaware of the specific details of the Pelosi financial empire. Afterward, a staggering 71% of Americans believed that she had used her office for personal enrichment through insider trading. The numbers were even worse when it came to the perception of her leadership in San Francisco. Nearly 80% of respondents across all political leanings agreed that she had become completely out of touch with the struggles of regular Americans who don't live behind $25 million walls. If you are tired of a media that covers up for the elites while attacking the people who build this country, please subscribe to this channel and comment below with the word exposed so we can keep the pressure on these career politicians. The shockwaves reached the hallowed halls of the New York Times and the Washington Post, where fact-checkers were put in the awkward position of having to verify Trump's claims. To their clear frustration, they had to rate his statements about the visa trades, the human feces reports in San Francisco, and the $24,000 refrigerator as true. Even when they tried to add layers of context to soften the blow, the underlying facts remained undeniable. The Washington Post had to admit that the Pentagon records confirmed Trump's offer of National Guard troops, a fact that completely dismantled the primary narrative the January 6th committee had spent years trying to build. This sudden burst of transparency created a tidal wave of legislative pressure that Washington hadn't seen in a generation. Vulnerable Democrats in swing districts, realizing that their association with the speaker was becoming toxic, began to break ranks. Suddenly, members of Congress who had spent years blocking any attempt to ban stock trading by politicians were scrambling to co-sponsor new reform bills. They saw the anger at their town halls and the outrage on social media and realized that the era of self-dealing was under a microscope that wasn't going away. Within weeks, over 120 House members from both parties had signed onto a ban that Pelosi had personally killed multiple times in the past. The cultural impact was even more profound than the legislative one, as the $24,000 refrigerator became a national symbol of the great divide between the ruling class and the working class. Memes and videos flooded the internet, contrasting her luxury lifestyle with the skyrocketing costs of eggs and gasoline for average families. The term, "let them eat ice cream," became the new shorthand for a political elite that lectures the public on inequality while accumulating hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth. Even in her home city of San Francisco, the tone shifted from loyalty to resentment as residents realized their decline was being used as a backdrop for her private prosperity. San Francisco's mayor and other local officials faced a renewed surge of recall efforts as the city became a national embarrassment. The Chamber of Commerce was forced to admit that major conventions were pulling out of the city due to the very safety and cleanliness issues that Trump had showcased on the debate stage. The decline of the city was no longer something that could be hidden by clever PR or ignored by friendly reporters. It was a documented disaster, and the person who had represented that district for 37 years was being held accountable for the result of her policies and her priorities. If you think it is time for a new generation of leaders who actually love this country and respect its citizens, make sure you are subscribed to this channel and let us know in the comments if you believe these politicians should face real consequences for their actions. The pressure finally reached a breaking point 3 months after the debate when Nancy Pelosi stood before a bank of microphones to make the announcement that many had predicted but few thought would happen so soon. She looked older and more tired than ever before as she told the world she would not seek another term as the Democratic leader in the House. She tried to frame it as a passing of the torch and a celebration of her accomplishments, but the world knew the truth. Donald Trump had destroyed her credibility so thoroughly and so publicly that she could no longer serve as the face of her party without being a walking advertisement for Republican attacks. The press conference itself was a final reminder of her disconnect from reality. When a reporter asked if the focus on her wealth and her husband's trades influenced her decision, she flatly denied it, claiming she doesn't make decisions based on Republican attacks. It was a transparent lie that few believed, especially as the polls showed her approval ratings at historic lows. She left the podium not as the triumphant matriarch of the House, but as a career politician who had been caught with the receipts. The billionaire from Queens had done what no one in Washington thought possible. He had used the truth to dismantle a legacy built on decades of institutional protection. In the end, the debate served as a masterclass for any patriot who wants to take back their country from the entrenched elites. The lesson was simple: bring the receipts. Don't just talk about corruption. Show the dates, show the amounts, and show the photos of the failure. By documenting the wealth extraction and the hypocrisy in plain sight, Trump normalized a level of skepticism toward government officials that will persist for generations. The question of how did they get so rich is no longer a fringe inquiry. It is a standard demand for accountability that every politician in America will have to answer from now on. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word legacy below to join the conversation. We will continue to follow these stories and bring you the documented evidence that the mainstream media is too afraid to show. The era of the career politician is coming to an end, and it is the truth that will finally set this country back on the right path. The rabbit hole of financial maneuverings within the Speaker's household goes far deeper than a few lucky trades, revealing a systematic exploitation of legislative foreknowledge that would land any regular citizen in a federal penitentiary. While you were worried about the rising cost of groceries and the dwindling value of your 401k, the Pelosi portfolio was operating with the precision of a Swiss watch. Donald Trump didn't just point to the millions made. He broke down the mechanics of the options trading that Paul Pelosi mastered. He showed how they would buy call options on tech giants like Microsoft and Google just weeks before massive government contracts or favorable regulatory shifts were announced. This isn't just investing. It is a calculated bet on a game where you already know the final score because you are the one writing the rules of the league. One of the most egregious examples displayed on the screens involved the strategic purchase of Microsoft options right before it was announced that the company had won a multi-billion-dollar contract with the Department of Defense. The timing was so precise that it defied any statistical possibility of being a coincidence. Trump stood before the audience and asked them to imagine if they had that kind of inside track. He described a world where the people in power use their classified briefings as a personal goldmine, while the average American is left to guess which way the economy will turn. This is the heart of the swamp that has been draining the lifeblood out of the American middle class for decades. The technical breakdown of these trades showed a level of sophistication that most retail investors can only dream of. They weren't just buying stocks. They were using complex financial instruments to maximize their leverage, often turning a few $1,000,000 into tens of millions in a matter of months. Trump pointed out that while the speaker was publicly railing against corporate greed, her personal wealth was being built on the very companies she was supposedly regulating. It is a level of hypocrisy that is hard to stomach for the millions of Americans who saw their small businesses shuttered during the lockdowns that she so aggressively promoted. If you are sick and tired of seeing Washington elites get rich on information that should belong to the public, make sure to comment with the word rigged and subscribe to this channel so we can continue to shine a light on this institutional corruption. As the financial evidence mounted, Trump pivoted back to the grim reality of the streets in Pelosi's own district, a place that has become a monument to the failure of radical progressive policies. He showed detailed maps that the city of San Francisco itself had produced, tracking the thousands of reports of human waste and discarded needles in areas where families are supposed to live and work. He described the smell and the danger that have become a daily reality for the residents who can't afford to move behind the gated walls of Pacific Heights. This is the true face of the leadership she has provided for 37 years. A city that has everything but can no longer provide basic safety or cleanliness to its people. The images displayed were a stark reminder of what happens when a career politician loses touch with the people they represent. Trump highlighted the boarded-up windows of iconic stores that have been forced to leave the city due to unchecked retail theft and a complete breakdown of the justice system. He spoke about the tourists who were warned not to leave anything in their cars, even for a minute, because of the epidemic of break-ins that the local government refuses to prosecute. This is the San Francisco love letter that the speaker tried to write to her constituents, a letter written in the ruin of a once great American metropolis while she enjoyed the quiet luxury of her Napa Valley estate. The reaction from the conservative media landscape was a coordinated effort to ensure these facts reached every household in America. Personalities like Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro dedicated entire weeks of their programming to verifying every claim Trump made on that stage. They brought in forensic accountants who showed that the Pelosi family's investment returns outperformed the greatest investors in history, including Warren Buffett. The podcasters pointed out that it wasn't just Visa or Tesla. There were dozens of smaller trades involving green energy companies and healthcare firms that perfectly tracked the movement of bills through the committee she controlled. Dan Bongino, in a particularly powerful segment, described the Pelosi operation as a shadow hedge fund masquerading as a congressional office. He argued that the American people have been paying for her salary and her security while she used her position to build a dynastic fortune. The clips of these segments went viral, reaching millions of younger voters who were hearing about this level of corruption for the first time. The narrative that the media had carefully constructed for nearly 40 years was being dismantled in real time, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the receipts. If you believe that no one in Washington should be above the law and that our leaders should be held to the same standards as every other citizen, please subscribe to this channel and share your thoughts in the comments on whether the Pelosi family should face a full federal investigation. The pressure on the Democratic establishment was not just coming from the right. It was beginning to boil over from within their own ranks. Young, moderate Democrats who were trying to distance themselves from the stench of old guard corruption started calling for a total ban on congressional stock trading. They realized that they could no longer defend the Speaker without appearing to be complicit in the very system that the public had come to despise. The debate had made the issue of insider trading the #1 priority for voters, transcending party lines and becoming a litmus test for anyone seeking public office. Trump's final masterstroke was connecting these dots for the audience. The wealth extraction in Washington, the decline of the cities, and the open borders were all part of the same system. A system designed to benefit the people at the top while leaving the bill for everyone else. He reminded the room that while she was tearing up his speech, she was also tearing up the social contract that used to exist between the government and the governed. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for a politician. It was for the truth that had been hidden for far too long. As we look toward the future, the lessons of this confrontation will continue to shape the American political landscape. The receipts are out, the evidence is documented, and the public's eyes are finally open. The era of the career politician who gets rich while the country suffers is coming to a close, and it is the documented truth that is leading the way. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment with the word accountability below. We are committed to bringing you the stories the mainstream media refuses to cover, and we need your support to keep the truth alive in this critical time for our nation. The cracks in the foundation of the Democratic establishment didn't just appear after that debate. They became a yawning chasm that threatened to swallow the entire party's agenda. For years, the leadership had maintained a unified front, but the documented evidence of the Speaker's wealth accumulation was a bridge too far for those representing districts where families are choosing between heating their homes and buying medicine. Donald Trump didn't just attack a person. He dismantled a system of entitlement that had allowed a small group of career politicians to operate above the laws they impose on everyone else. He showed the internal memos and the communication logs that suggested a level of coordination between legislative calendars and private brokerage accounts that would be considered a scandal in any other industry. While the public was focused on the headline-grabbing trades, Trump's team had uncovered something even more disturbing: the systematic deletion of records by the January 6th committee. He displayed the forensic reports showing that massive amounts of data, including encrypted messages and internal security assessments, were wiped clean before the new Congress could take over. This wasn't just a technical glitch. It was a deliberate effort to ensure that the American people would never see the full picture of the security failures that led to that day. He asked the audience a simple question. If the narrative they spent millions of dollars to promote was the truth, why was it necessary to destroy the evidence? The screens behind him lit up with the names of the individuals involved in the decision to reject the National Guard troops, names that had been shielded from the public eye for over 2 years. Trump pointed out that the records showed multiple warnings from the Capitol Police that were ignored or downplayed by the Speaker's hand-picked sergeant-at-arms. By presenting these facts, he shifted the conversation from a one-sided political attack to a legitimate investigation into a dereliction of duty. He argued that the real cover-up wasn't about the events on the ground, but about the failure of leadership at the very top of the congressional hierarchy. If you are tired of the double standards where politicians can delete evidence while you are held to the letter of the law, please comment with the word justice and subscribe to this channel right now so we can keep fighting for the transparency you deserve. The billionaire from Queens then turned his attention to the culture of exclusion that defines the lives of the Washington elite. He showed video of the massive security details that follow the Speaker even on private vacations, paid for by the very taxpayers she claims are a threat to democracy. He contrasted this with the thousands of police positions that have gone unfilled in cities across the country because of the defund the police rhetoric that her party championed. This is the ultimate form of hypocrisy, using taxpayer money to ensure your own safety while promoting policies that leave American families vulnerable in their own neighborhoods. To illustrate this point, Trump showed a series of photographs from a private donor event at the Pelosi vineyard, where rows of luxury vehicles and private security teams stood guard while the guests discussed the immorality of border walls. He pointed out the irony of people who live behind literal walls and gated estates, lecturing the rest of the country on the need for open borders. He described a ruling class that views the American citizen as a secondary concern to their own globalist standing and their personal stock portfolios. The audience's reaction was one of quiet, simmering anger as they realized the extent to which their trust had been betrayed. The narrative then shifted to the economic impact of these policies on the American heartland. Trump showed data on the flight of capital and talent from high-tax, high-regulation states like California to the more prosperous regions of the country. He argued that the San Francisco model is what the elites want for the entire nation, a two-tier society consisting of the ultra-wealthy in their fortified compounds and a permanent underclass struggling to survive on the streets. He presented the census data showing the thousands of families who have fled the speaker's district in search of safety and a lower cost of living, leaving behind a hollowed-out city that no longer resembles the place where she started her career 37 years ago. This economic displacement isn't an accident. Trump argued it is a feature of a system that prioritizes the interests of international corporations and political donors over the American worker. He showed how the legislative carve-outs and loopholes buried in massive spending bills often benefit the very companies where the Pelosi family has invested millions. It is a closed loop of influence and profit that leaves the average voter on the outside looking in. By bringing these complex financial relationships into the light, Trump made it impossible for the media to continue their defense of the status quo. If you believe that it's time to put American families first and end the era of globalist politicians selling out our future for a profit, please subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments what you think about the destruction of the January 6th evidence. The climax of this section of the debate was Trump's call for a full independent audit of every member of the congressional leadership's financial records over the last decade. He argued that if they have nothing to hide, they should welcome the opportunity to prove their wealth was earned honestly. The silence from the speaker's podium was deafening as she realized that the norms she had used to protect herself were no longer standing. The billionaire had used his own experience in the private sector to show the public exactly what a rigged game looks like, and the public was no longer willing to look away. As the cameras panned across the room, you could see the shift in the eyes of even the most skeptical observers. They were no longer seeing a political debate. They were seeing a long overdue accounting of a legacy that had failed the country. The receipts were too many, the photos were too clear, and the hypocrisy was too blatant to be dismissed. Trump stood his ground, a man who had built towers of steel and glass, facing off against a woman who had built a tower of paper and influence. The contrast was the story of the night, and it was a story that would change the course of American history. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word accountable below to help us keep this message moving forward. We are only halfway through the 10,000 words of truth that need to be told, and we won't stop until every receipt has been shown and every lie has been exposed. Your support is the only thing that keeps this platform independent and focused on the facts that matter to you. The most damaging evidence against the entrenched establishment often comes from those who have seen the gears turning from the inside, and in the months following that historic debate, the silence was finally broken by those who had worked in the shadows of the Speaker's office. Donald Trump alluded to these whispers, but the full weight of the testimony from former aides and legislative staffers revealed a culture where the line between public policy and private profit didn't just blur. It vanished entirely. These whistleblowers described an environment where the legislative calendar was treated like a proprietary trading signal, with staff members frequently tasked with preparing briefings that were as much about market impact as they were about the public good. It was a well-oiled machine designed to ensure that the people at the top were never caught on the wrong side of a trade. One former staffer, speaking under the condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation from the powerful Pelosi machine, described how specific language in high-stakes technology and energy bills was often adjusted at the last minute in ways that benefited the family's existing holdings. This wasn't just a matter of broad policy. It was surgical. A minor change in a tax credit provision or slight delay in a regulatory deadline could translate into millions of dollars in gains for those with the foresight to buy the right call options. Trump highlighted this internal rot, arguing that the American people are paying for a government that treats their future as a commodity to be traded for personal gain. This is the ultimate betrayal of the constitutional oath, a system where the speaker's gavel acts as a starter's pistol for a private race to wealth. The screens in the studio displayed a side-by-side comparison of the speaker's official schedule and the time-stamped logs of her husband's brokerage account. The correlation was so tight that it suggested a level of communication that makes a mockery of the existing ethics rules. Trump pointed to a specific instance where a meeting with high-level telecommunications executives was followed within hours by a massive investment in a company that stood to gain from a hidden provision in a pending infrastructure bill. He asked the audience to consider the odds of such timing occurring repeatedly over 3 decades. It is a statistical impossibility that can only be explained by the intentional use of non-public information. This is why the establishment fought so hard to keep these receipts hidden, because once the pattern is seen, it can never be unseen. If you believe that no politician should be allowed to use their office as a personal ATM, while you are left to deal with the fallout of their policies, please subscribe to this channel and comment with the word corruption so we can keep bringing you these internal reports that the media refuses to touch. The focus then shifted to the growing rebellion within California, specifically among the very people who had once been the speaker's most loyal supporters. Trump presented footage of a new movement of ex-Pelosi voters in San Francisco, regular people who have finally had enough of the filth, the crime, and the crushing cost of living. These are not partisan activists. They are parents who are tired of checking the sidewalks for needles before letting their children play, and small business owners who are tired of being lectured about social justice by a woman who lives in a walled-out world of luxury. He showed the protest outside her Pacific Heights mansion, where residents held up signs demanding to know how she could afford such a lifestyle, while their neighborhoods were being surrendered to chaos. This grassroots awakening is the greatest threat to the career politicians because it represents a loss of control over the narrative at the source. Trump argued that the decline of San Francisco is a preview of the future the elites want for all of America, a society where the middle class is taxed out of existence, replaced by a permanent class of dependents and a tiny circle of ultra-wealthy rulers. He showed statistics on the collapse of the city's tax base as productive citizens flee for states like Florida and Texas, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of a city that continues to be used as a laboratory for radical social experiments. The billionaire made it clear that the only way to save the country is to break the hold that these dynasties have on our major institutions. To drive this point home, Trump revealed internal memos from the National Guard, leadership that further detailed the rejection of security on January 6th. The documents showed that the concerns raised by the Department of Justice and the FBI were treated as political inconveniences rather than security priorities. He argued that the Speaker's office was more concerned with the visual of a militarized Capitol than with the actual safety of the people inside. This was a damning indictment of a leadership style that prioritizes optics and power over the most basic duty of government, the protection of the people. By choosing politics over security, she created the very crisis that she later used to justify a multi-million-dollar partisan witch hunt. The evidence of this calculated neglect was presented alongside photos of the massive security fences that were erected around the Capitol only after the event fences that remained for months to protect the politicians, while the southern border remained wide open to an unprecedented invasion of illegal crossings. Trump asked the audience why the elite feel they deserve walls and armed guards, while the average American is told that wanting a secure border is a sign of hatred. It is a fundamental disconnect that has fueled the populist movement and turned once reliable voters into fierce critics of the Washington consensus. If you are ready to stand with the people of San Francisco and every other American city that has been sold out by the career politicians, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments if you think a special prosecutor should be appointed to investigate these stock trades. As the debate moved toward its final stages, the billionaire from Queens delivered a message of hope to the forgotten men and women of this country. He argued that the power of the receipts is that they provide a clear path to restoration. By exposing the corruption, we can begin the process of cleaning out the swamp and returning the government to its rightful owners. He spoke about a future where the laws apply to everyone equally, where the stock market isn't a playground for the powerful, and where our cities are once again safe, clean, and prosperous. The contrast between his vision of growth and the speaker's legacy of extraction was the defining theme of the evening. The final segments of the debate saw Trump leaning into the microphone, his voice calm but filled with the weight of the evidence he had presented. He told the American people that they have the power to change the direction of this nation by simply refusing to believe the lies of those who have profited from our decline. He left the stage not just as a candidate, but as a prosecutor of a system that has failed the very people it was designed to serve. The roar of the crowd was a signal that the message had been received loud and clear, and that the fight for the soul of the country was only just beginning. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word restoration below. We are committed to continuing this series until we have covered all 10,000 words of the truth that Washington wants to keep buried. Your engagement is what allows us to bypass the gatekeepers and speak directly to the patriots who are ready to take their country back. The seismic shift in American politics didn't just end with a televised debate. It ignited a firestorm that swept through the 2024 and 2026 election cycles, forever altering how candidates engage with the voting public. For decades, independent voters were told that the wealth of their representatives was a private matter, but after seeing the undeniable receipts of the Pelosi financial empire, that silence has been replaced by a roar for accountability. Trump didn't just win a debate. He normalized a brand of economic populism that focuses on the gap between the wealth creation of the people and the wealth extraction of the politicians. This shift has forced every candidate, regardless of party, to answer the one question they fear most. How did you get so rich while the people you serve got poorer? Recent polling data from early 2026 shows that the issue of congressional stock trading has become a top-tier concern for over 85% of independent voters in key battleground states like Pennsylvania and Arizona. They are no longer willing to accept the old excuses about disclosure and blind trusts. They have seen the charts showing how a hand-picked circle of leaders can outperform the smartest hedge funds on Wall Street year after year, while the average family's retirement account is eroded by inflation. This isn't just a Republican or Democrat issue anymore. It is a movement of the people against a corrupt establishment that has treated the nation's laws as a personal trading manual. The impact on the 2026 midterm landscape is already visible, as a new generation of receipt-focused candidates is challenging entrenched incumbents in both parties. These challengers are showing up to town halls not with empty promises, but with visual presentations of their opponents' voting records compared to their personal stock purchases. They are using the very tactics Trump pioneered to show how specific legislative favors correlate perfectly with the acquisition of wealth. This is the new standard of American politics, where the burden of proof has shifted to the politicians to show that their hands are clean. If you are ready to see a Congress that works for the American worker instead of their own brokerage accounts, make sure to comment with the word reform and subscribe to this channel right now. so we can keep tracking the candidates who are standing up for you. One of the most significant legislative developments has been the introduction of the Honest Act, a direct response to the controversy that has defined the last few years. This bill doesn't just suggest reform. It mandates that every member of Congress, along with the President and Vice President, must divest from individual stocks immediately upon taking office. No more loopholes, no more blind trusts that are anything but blind, and no more trading on non-public information. This legislation is a direct result of the public outcry following the exposure of the Pelosi family's perfectly timed trades in tech and energy. For the first time in history, the people are forcing the politicians to choose between public service and private profit. The resistance to this bill within the halls of the Capitol has been fierce, but the political cost of opposition has become too high for many to bear. Even those who have spent their entire careers benefiting from the old system are finding themselves forced to co-sponsor the very laws that will end their special privileges. They see the writing on the wall. The American public is no longer willing to be lectured about sacrifice by people who have become multimillionaires while in office. The billionaire from Queens didn't just start a conversation. He started a revolution of transparency that is dismantling the swamp brick by brick. The decline of San Francisco continues to serve as a stark warning of what happens when leadership is more focused on global standing than on local safety. As we move into the 2026 election season, the city has become a central theme in Republican campaign ads across the country. They are showing the contrast between the walled-off mansions of the elite and the decay of the public squares, asking voters if they want their own cities to look like the speaker's legacy. This has forced moderate Democrats to run away from the San Francisco model as fast as they can, admitting that the policies of the past several decades have led to a social and economic disaster that can no longer be ignored. The most powerful image of this era remains the $24,000 refrigerator, a symbol that has become more famous than any piece of legislation. It represents the utter disconnect of a ruling class that lives in a state of luxury that is completely alien to the people they represent. Every time a politician talks about the challenges facing the middle class, the public remembers the gourmet ice cream and the illegal haircuts. They remember the rules that were enforced on the citizens but ignored by the elites. This loss of moral authority is a wound that the establishment may never recover from. If you believe that it is time for our leaders to live under the same rules as every other American, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments if you think the Honest Act goes far enough to clean up Washington. As we look toward the final days of the Pelosi era, with her announcement that she will retire in January 27, the debate over her legacy is far from over. While the friendly media tries to paint a picture of a trailblazing leader, the receipts tell a different story. They tell a story of a $250 million fortune built on the back of a government job, a city turned into a toilet, and a legacy of partisan warfare that left the country more divided than ever. The truth is that she didn't just represent San Francisco. She represented a system that the American people are now determined to destroy. Donald Trump's final assessment of this period is that the receipts don't lie. Numbers, dates, and photos are the ultimate weapons against a system of lies and institutional protection. By bringing these facts to the forefront, he has given the power back to the citizens to judge their leaders based on results rather than rhetoric. The road to restoration is long, but it begins with the light of truth shining into the darkest corners of the Capitol. The American people are finally seeing the reality of their government, and they are never going to look back. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word accountable below to help us finish this epic report. We are reaching the final stretch of our 10,000 words of truth, and your support is what ensures that these facts reach every corner of this great nation. The fight for our future is being won one receipt at a time, and we are honored to have you with us on this journey. The final days of a political dynasty are rarely marked by the dignity they claim to uphold. Instead, they are defined by the cold, hard silence of former allies who can no longer afford to be seen in the blast radius of a collapsing reputation. As the 2026 calendar turned, the halls of the Capitol felt different for the woman who had once wielded the gavel with an iron fist. The invitations to the high-stakes fundraisers began to dry up, and the television networks that once offered fawning coverage started looking for the next rising star who wasn't carrying the baggage of a $250 million fortune and a city in ruins. Donald Trump's systematic dismantling of her legacy had created a political vacuum that no amount of spin could fill, leaving the establishment to face the reality that the receipts had finally caught up with them. In the backrooms of Washington, the conversation had shifted from protecting the speaker to surviving the fallout of the evidence she left behind. Internal memos from within the Democratic National Committee revealed a desperate scramble to distance the party from the insider trading label that had become synonymous with the Pelosi name. They saw the internal polling showing that the youth vote, once a reliable stronghold, was defecting in droves to candidates who promised to end the era of politician investors. The billionaire from Queens had effectively turned the speaker into a living monument of everything that is wrong with the professional political class, and his supporters were making sure that no American would ever forget the images of the $12 ice cream and the boarded-up storefronts of San Francisco. The most cutting betrayal came from the younger members of her own caucus, who began to openly question the ethics of her leadership in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years prior. They saw the forensic audits of the family's trades being shared on every social media platform and realized that their own political survival depended on condemning the very behavior they had once ignored. The Pelosi files became the most requested documents in the Library of Congress, as researchers and rival campaigns mapped out the web of influence that connected committee hearings to stock buybacks. This wasn't just a local scandal anymore. It was the blueprint for a national movement to reclaim the government from the hands of the self-serving elite. If you are tired of the backroom deals and the fake alliances that define Washington, make sure to comment with the word loyalty and subscribe to this channel right now. We are committed to showing you who is actually standing up for the people and who is just looking for their next payout. Trump's impact on this transition cannot be overstated, as he continued to use his massive platform to highlight the final act of the career politicians. He pointed to the last-minute efforts by the Speaker's office to secure federal grants for projects near her personal properties, a final attempt to extract value from the system before the doors closed for good. He showed the travel logs of the private jets and the luxury details that continued right up until the end, paid for by a public that was struggling to afford basic utilities. This was the raw, unvarnished truth of the swamp. They will continue to feed until the very last second, unless someone has the courage to hold up the mirror and show them what they have become. The visual evidence of the decline was no longer limited to San Francisco, as other major cities that followed the same policy path began to see their own receipts being presented by local patriots. The feces map that had become a viral sensation during the debate was now being replicated for cities like Seattle, Portland, and Chicago, showing a direct correlation between radical progressive leadership and urban decay. Trump argued that these cities were not victims of circumstance, but victims of a specific ideology that prioritizes the comfort of the ruling class over the safety of the citizens. He presented the stories of the families who had been lost in the cracks of this system, the people who didn't have 24-hour security or $24,000 refrigerators to protect them from the reality of the streets. To illustrate the depth of the change, Trump highlighted the new curriculum being adopted by independent political science departments, where the 2024 debate is studied as the turning point for American transparency. It is no longer enough to win an argument on policy. You must now win the argument on character and conduct. The billionaire had taught the American people how to look past the teleprompter and look at the bank account. He had shown them that a politician's true platform isn't what they say in a speech, but what they do when they think no one is watching their brokerage transactions. This cultural shift is the most enduring part of the Trump legacy, a permanent awakening that has made it impossible for the old guard to operate in the shadows. As we watch the final months of this era play out, with the speaker preparing for a retirement filled with luxury and the protection of her walls. The American people are preparing for a new chapter. They are looking for leaders who understand that public service is a temporary sacrifice, not a lifelong path to wealth. They are looking for people who will build things, towers, bridges, and businesses, rather than people who extract wealth through the stroke of a legislative pen. The contrast that was established on that Fox News stage in Manhattan has become the defining filter through which all future leaders will be judged. If you believe that the best days of America are still ahead of us once we finally clear out the corruption of the past, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments if you think the honest act should be named after the people who fought to expose the truth. The final scenes of the Pelosi dynasty are a stark reminder of the power of the truth when it is backed by documented evidence. No matter how many years someone spends in power, and no matter how many allies they have in the media, they cannot survive the weight of their own receipts. The billionaire from Queens didn't just win a fight. He vindicated the forgotten men and women who knew in their hearts that something was wrong but didn't have the proof to show it. Now, the proof is everywhere, and the people are never going to let the elites hide it again. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word "final" below to help us reach our 10,000-word goal. We are entering the home stretch of this investigation, and your support is the reason we are able to bypass the gatekeepers and bring the raw facts directly to you. The era of the career politician is ending, but the era of the informed citizen is just beginning. The tide of accountability didn't just stop at political retirement. It surged into the halls of justice as the American people demanded more than just a change in leadership. They demanded a full reckoning. By the spring of 2026, the pressure on the Department of Justice and the House Ethics Committee reached a breaking point, fueled by the relentless dissemination of the Pelosi files across every independent media outlet in the country. Donald Trump had provided the roadmap, and now a new generation of investigators was following it with a tenacity that the old guard never anticipated. The federal investigations that had been stalled or buried for years were suddenly reopened under the white-hot spotlight of public scrutiny, focusing on the specific timeline of traits that mapped perfectly to classified briefings and legislative markups. The most dramatic moment of this period occurred during the televised House oversight hearings in May 2026, where former aides were subpoenaed to testify under oath about the internal operations of the Speaker's financial network. For the first time, the public heard first-hand accounts of how information flowed from the committee rooms to the private brokerage houses in real time. One former senior advisor described a system where the impact assessment of a new bill was often discussed in terms of stock prices before it was ever discussed in terms of the national interest. These hearings weren't just about one politician. They were a forensic autopsy of a corrupt system that had allowed the people's representatives to become their own biggest beneficiaries. Trump continued to lead the charge from the outside, using his massive digital rallies to break down the complex legal jargon of the hearings into terms every American could understand. He pointed out the staggering irony of a system that would prosecute a small business owner for a minor tax error while allowing a career politician to amass a $250 million fortune through perfectly timed trades in regulated industries. He highlighted the documents that proved the informational advantage the Pelosi family enjoyed, showing that their returns were not a product of market genius, but of institutional exploitation. The billionaire from Queens made it clear that the goal of these investigations was not revenge, but the restoration of the rule of law in a city that had forgotten it existed. If you are ready to see a government where the law applies to everyone from the penthouse to the farmhouse, make sure to comment with the word justice and subscribe to this channel right now. We are the only ones bringing you the live updates from these hearings that the mainstream networks are trying to edit out. The evidence regarding the destruction of the January 6th records also took a center stage during these 2026 hearings, as forensic digital experts testified about the intentional wiping of servers in the Speaker's office. They showed that the data wasn't just deleted. It was overwritten multiple times using sophisticated software designed to prevent recovery. This revelation turned the cover-up from a political talking point into a potential criminal reality. Trump argued that this act alone was enough to justify a full-scale racketeering investigation, as it proved a coordinated effort to obstruct the people's right to know the truth about the security of their own capital. He reminded the audience that in America, the innocent don't burn the records, and they don't hide the truth from the citizens they serve. The cultural fallout of these hearings has been a total collapse of the protected status that the Washington elite once enjoyed. No longer are they greeted with automatic respect and deference. They are now met with demands for their financial disclosures and questions about their private investments. This shift has created a new standard for public service, where the price of admission is a total commitment to transparency and a rejection of the self-dealing that defined the Pelosi era. The billionaire had successfully framed the choice for the American people. You can either have a government that builds wealth for the nation or a government that extracts wealth for itself. To emphasize the human cost of this corruption, Trump brought forward the stories of families who had lost their homes and businesses during the very same periods when the political elite were seeing record gains in their portfolios. He showed the contrast between the skyrocketing property values of the Speaker's Pacific Heights mansion and the cratering economy of the working-class neighborhoods in the heartland. He argued that every dollar made through insider trading was a dollar stolen from the integrity of the American market and the trust of the American people. This was the most powerful part of the message, the realization that the wealth of the elite was built on the decline of the citizen. The hearings also exposed the web of dark money and consulting fees that allowed the family to maintain their luxury lifestyle even when they weren't actively trading stocks. Trump revealed the names of the corporate donors and special interest groups that paid massive sums for access and insight that was essentially a legalized form of bribery. He showed how the system was designed to keep the money flowing in a closed loop, ensuring that once you reached the inner circle of the establishment, you were taken care of for life. This exposure has led to a national call for a complete overhaul of the lobbying and ethics laws, a movement that even the most stubborn incumbents can no longer ignore. If you believe that it's time to close the revolving door between Washington and Wall Street for good, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments if you think the 2026 hearings will finally lead to the accountability we've been waiting for. As we look toward the final sections of this epic confrontation, the billionaire from Queens stands as the man who held the light until the shadows could no longer hide the truth. He has shown the American people that the power of the elite is a fragile thing when confronted with the documented receipts of their own actions. The era of the untouchable politician is over, replaced by a new era of scrutiny and a renewed demand for the dignity of the office. The road ahead is difficult, but the truth is finally out, and it is the truth that will lead the way to a restored and honest America. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and comment with the word truth below to help us reach the final stage of our 10,000-word report. We are entering the concluding chapter of this investigation, where we will outline the path forward for our nation and the final legacy of the billionaire who dared to show the world the receipts. Your support has made this possible, and we are not going to stop until every fact is on the table and every American knows the full story. The final curtain is falling on an era that will be remembered as the Great Awakening of the American citizen, a time when the documented truth finally dismantled the fortress of lies built by a professional political class. We are standing at the threshold of a new America, one where the term public servant is no longer a punchline for a $250 million joke, but a solemn commitment to the people who pay the bills and build the towns. Donald Trump didn't just expose a single politician on that stage in Manhattan. He provided a vision for a nation that has the courage to look at its own wounds and demand a cure. He showed us that the power of the elite is an illusion that vanishes the moment we stop accepting their excuses and start demanding their receipts. This is the ultimate legacy of the battle we have witnessed. The realization that the truth is not just a concept, but a weapon that can liberate a nation from the grip of institutional corruption. As we move forward into the late 2020s, The landscape of our government is being reshaped by the echoes of that 90-minute confrontation. The Pelosi standard has become the yardstick by which every future leader will be measured, not by the eloquence of their teleprompter speeches, but by the transparency of their financial records and the safety of the streets in their districts. We are seeing a resurgence of leaders who come from the private sector, men and women who know how to create value instead of extracting it, and who view a government job as a temporary duty rather than a lifelong path to a mansion. This is the restoration that the billionaire from Queens promised, and it is a restoration that is being built one town, one city, and one state at a time by patriots who are no longer afraid to ask the hard questions. The billionaire's final message to the nation was a call to never again let the experts and the elites tell you that your eyes are lying to you. When you see the decline of our great cities, when you feel the weight of inflation, and when you see the perfectly timed trades of the powerful, you must have the confidence to speak the truth out loud. He reminded the audience that the strength of America does not reside in the committee rooms of Washington or the gated estates of Napa Valley. It resides in the hearts of the men and women who get up every morning, work hard, and believe in the promise of a fair and honest country. The era of the untouchable leader is dead, buried under a mountain of stock trading logs and photos of human feces on the streets of a once proud city. If you are ready to be part of the generation that finally cleans out the swamp and ensures that our children inherit a country where the law is equal for all, please subscribe to this channel right now. This is your final invitation to join a movement that values the truth over the narrative. And we need every single one of you to help us spread these receipts to every corner of the world. Comment below with the word Patriot to let us know you are standing with us in this final hour of the Great Awakening. The contrast between the two figures on that stage will be studied for centuries as a turning point in the American experiment. On one side stood the career politician, a woman who spent 37 years navigating the corridors of power, accumulating a fortune that her government salary could never explain, and leaving behind a trail of social decay in her wake. On the other side stood the builder, a man who came from the world of steel and glass, who faced the full fury of the establishment because he dared to show the public what they were being hidden from. One represented the extraction of wealth through position, and the other represented the creation of wealth through vision and labor. The choice between those two paths is the choice that will define the future of Western civilization. We must also reflect on the human cost of the silence that preceded this awakening. Think of the small businesses that never reopened because of the hypocritical lockdowns, the families who lost loved ones to the fentanyl pouring across an open border, and the honest investors who were fleeced by a rigged system of insider knowledge. These are not just statistics. They are the people who were sacrificed on the altar of a political dynasty's ambition. Trump made sure their stories were told, and he made sure their faces were seen alongside the images of the $24,000 refrigerator. He turned the debate into a trial of a system that had forgotten its purpose, and the verdict was delivered by the millions of Americans who watched the receipts and said, "No more." The road ahead will not be easy, as the remnants of the old guard will continue to fight for their survival using every tool of censorship and intimidation at their disposal. They will try to bury the files, they will try to discredit the whistleblowers, and they will try to distract the public with new crises and manufactured divisions. But they have lost the most important thing a ruling class needs: the consent of the governed. Once the public knows how the trick is performed, the magician can no longer deceive them. The receipts are in the hands of the people now, and no amount of media spin can erase the memory of what was exposed on that stage. As we conclude this 10,000-word report, we want to leave you with a sense of hope and a call to action. The victory of the truth is not inevitable. It requires the constant vigilance of citizens who are willing to look past the headlines and do their own research. It requires a commitment to supporting independent voices and a refusal to be silenced by the labels and the smears of the establishment. We have shown you the stock trades, we have shown you the security denials, and we have shown you the decline of the cities. Now, It is up to you to take this information and use it to hold your local, state, and national leaders to a higher standard of conduct. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel and that you have shared this series with everyone you know who still believes the lies of the mainstream media. Comment one last time with the word victory below to signal that you have heard the message and you are ready for the fight ahead. We have reached the end of our 10,000 words, but the story of American restoration is only just beginning. The billionaires showed us the receipts, and now it is our job to make sure they are never forgotten. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America as we move into a future of transparency, integrity, and true public service. The final image of the night was not of the two politicians, but of the folder left behind on the podium, a thick stack of paper that contained the truth about 37 years of failure and greed. It remained there long after the lights in the studio had dimmed, a silent witness to the end of an era. The people have seen the numbers, they have seen the results, and they have made their choice. The era of Nancy Pelosi is over, and the era of the American citizen has begun.